So, what is muscle testing? Muscle testing is a form of applied kinesiology which allows a physical response to a question that we ask our supercomputer. Our supercomputer, aka the subconscious mind, or you can also refer to it as the highest form of yourself. You may find that your chiropractor uses muscle testing as well as an Ayurvedic doctor. They will often use it to determine how many supplements that you need or if there's any misalignments in your body. That's something that can be determined with muscle testing as well. Really, the opportunities to use muscle testing are innumerable, so I'm very excited for you to learn this skill. Now, before you begin any muscle testing session, there's 3 things to make sure that you do first and foremost. 1, set a very clear intention of what you are trying to muscle test. 2, make sure that you are well hydrated. And 3, focus on your breath. All of this will make sense as we continue going through the course. Now let's get started and let's talk about the sway test method. There are a few forms of muscle testing, but in this course, we're going to focus on 2 types specifically. One is the sway method and the other is the ring and ring. Right now, let's focus in on the sway test method. The sway test method is the ability to tap into yourself using your whole body. This method requires you to be standing upright. The trick is to stand up with your feet about a hip width apart, with your knees slightly bent, and to be really relaxed in your body. A good rule of thumb is always just to kind of shake off any tension before you get into your standing position. So as you begin to start swaying, once we start asking questions, if you sway forward, that means it's a yes answer. If you sway backwards, that means it's a no answer. And if you don't sway at all, it means it's a neutral response. Or it could mean that we need to do a little bit of troubleshooting, but we'll get to that later on in the course. When it comes to the muscle testing methods, what I recommend that you do now is just follow through these slides, because right now we're going to be covering the educational side of it and what everything is, and then we'll actually go into the example and the practice part of it later on in the course. But right now, I need you to understand the fundamentals first. The ring and ring method is easily done while sitting, standing, or really in any position you want to be in, as long as you can interlock your fingers together. It requires you to use only your thumb and your index finger. To set yourself up for the ring and ring method, what you'll be doing is creating circles with your index finger and your thumb. Index finger and thumb. Basically like when you make goggles over your eyes, when you pretend like you're a superhero, you do the same thing, but you're doing them with your fingers. And you are not putting them over your eyes. You're actually going like this, where you're interlocking them together. So you just kind of open up the fingers, let them slide through, and now you've got your interlocking fingers. Now this I can more easily demonstrate because obviously I don't need to be standing for this method like I would need to be for the sway test, but with the interlocking fingers, you're just gonna have your fingertips really gently pressing atop one another. You're not gonna be adding a lot of pressure. It's gonna be very gentle. And if you were to ask a question to yourself or to your higher self where the answer is yes, the fingers will not break apart. They will stay very nice and taut. Again, no pressure, but they'll just stay. However, if you're asking a question where the response is no, when you go to break them apart, they will in fact break apart because it's a no response. So your body just kind of lets go in that sense, like, no, wrong answer, no, and it breaks apart. Where yeses, they do stay together. So there's a little bit of a resistance there on a yes. If the response is a neutral answer, it could either break apart or it could not break apart. It goes either way. And when that happens, again, we'll get into the troubleshooting, but that's just using your discernment whether to ask the question again, determine maybe if you need to change the question, and you'll get a better understanding the farther along we go in this course. But it's either going to be a yes, a no, or it could be a yes and a no. It just depends. Whatever works. All right, so let's talk about troubleshooting. I know I mentioned that before, so let's go a little bit more in depth as to why your muscle testing responses may be a little bit off or just any problem that may arise while you go through this process. So the first thing to address is hydration. If your muscles are depleted, you can imagine that the muscle testing response is going to be less than accurate. So make sure that you're properly hydrated. That way you can guarantee having proper responses. Also, when learning, I am a huge fan of the rule of three. Now, the rule of three is basically saying that when you ask a question via muscle testing 3 times, that during that time, you're guaranteed a correct response. So let's say you ask a question and you get a no response, but you're like, okay, how do I know that's true? How do I know that's right? So then if you ask the question again and you get a no response, and then you ask it again and you get another no response. So 3 times in a row, you get no. One is going to think, okay, obviously there's something to that and there's truth behind it. So that's the rule of threes. And honestly, it's very handy to use as you learn, and I highly recommend it. It'll help you really feel more confident in your answers. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about neutral responses, and neutral responses are just that. They're neutral. Usually they come up when an answer is either a yes or a no, where you're asking a question and honestly the answer is irrelevant. It doesn't really matter because it's one in the same. So that would be a neutral response. Another opportunity for yes and no's to become interchangeable is when the question is a little too vague and you just need to be a little bit more specific. As we go forward, we'll talk more about how to craft the perfect question. And so you won't have to worry about neutral responses happening because your questions are too vague. Another important factor in troubleshooting is to remember that positive thinking goes so far. It helps more than you can even imagine. If you are coming at this muscle testing practice saying, ugh, I can't do this. This is hard. This is weird. This doesn't make any sense. Well, then your answers are going to be all over the place. You really have to work on overriding any negative thinking and just trusting the process and knowing that you too can learn. It's super easy. If I can learn it, you can learn it.